All right, this video is to help you prepare for the Alabama Science Assessment. We're looking at Content Standard number 9, which is talking about the relationships between various types of organisms. And in this one, we're looking at populations that are within a habitat or within an ecosystem and various communities in those ecosystems. So we're going to look at consumers and producers, those that eat plants, those that eat meat, those that eat both. Relationships between populations and communities, and then there's some vocabulary that we have to look at. So let's start off with the first part. This is a typical food chain that you might see, and a food chain describes the flow of energy. So we know that the energy for the plankton comes from the sun. So really it kind of left out one thing. We've got the sun here, and the plankton, this phytoplankton, is able to turn the sunlight into food. They provide food for the krill provide food for the small fish for the salmon for the bald eagle. So the arrows are indicating the flow of energy. It's not who is eating whom, it's the flow of the energy. The energy goes from the sun to the plankton, from the plankton to the krill, and so forth. So the relationship here is each animal or organism that's further down the line depends on the organism in front of it. Let's say, for example, that something happened and something really bad happened to the krill, and the krill were wiped out. They were no longer a part of this food chain. Just look at this for a minute and think about what would happen. Are we going to have a lot more plankton? Without any krill to eat the plankton, we are going to have more. So the plankton population is going to grow. But who's going to feed the small fish? Where are they going to get their energy from? Now all of a sudden they've lost their food supply. So what's going to happen to the small fish? They're going to start to die off. That in turn is going to affect the salmon. The salmon are going to have less food to eat. They're going to begin to die off. The salmon begin to die off. The bald eagles all of a sudden have less of a food source. They're not going to be as plentiful either. So by removing one component of the food chain, you're messing up the whole food chain, and everything down the line from it is going to decrease in its population. The plankton, however, because it doesn't have anything to eat it, is going to continue to grow. So the plankton population will increase, but the rest are going to decrease. And the same would be true if I moved this anywhere down the line. Say I said it was the not the krill are gone. Heck, that all messed up. But it's the this time it's the small fish. Well, the plankton would stay relegated because the krill are still eating them, so the plankton wouldn't get too large in population. The krill, however, don't have anything to eat them, so they're going to grow in abundance. But the salmon have lost their food source and are going to begin to die off, and again, that'll affect the bald eagle as well. Okay. So another example is being able to identify what type of organism we're talking about. If it can make its own food, it's considered a producer. Anything that can make its own food, that includes all plants, and then there are some other organisms, diatoms and things like that, that can make their own food. They're considered producers. Okay? So what might eat the plant? Anything that would eat the plant would be considered a first-level consumer. The mouse is obviously going to eat plant. Mice also eat bugs too, so be careful about the mice. The mice are also going to be prey because there are other bigger animals that are going to eat them, like the snake. The snake is not interested in any of the plants. The snake is interested in things like mice. So the snake is going to be considered a second-level consumer because it eats something that eats plants. It's also the predator because it's feeding off of things like mice. It has to hunt down mice. It can also be a prey to something like a hawk. A hawk is definitely a predator. It would be considered a second level consumer if it ate the mouse, because it's eating the thing that ate the plant. But if it eats the snake, then it's eating the thing that ate the thing that ate the plant. You with me? So now it's a third level consumer. So the hawk could be a predator. It's always going to be a predator because it doesn't eat anything but meat. So a hawk is always a predator. But it could be a second level consumer or a third level, just depending on what it chooses to eat. Okay. So with these, we could label these and we would say, well, we know the hawk is definitely a predator. And in this situation, the snake is a predator. I didn't put bugs up there, so I'm not going to put the mouse down as a predator, but mice do eat bugs sometimes. First level consumer, the only one here interested in eating the plant is the mouse, so that makes it a first level consumer. The plant is the only producer here. None of the other organisms can make their own food. The mouse is a prey because it can get eaten by the snake or the hawk. The snake is a prey because it can get eaten by the hawk. The snake becomes a second level consumer because it eats the thing that eats the plants. The hawk could eat the mouse, which would make it eating the thing that eats the plant, so it's second level. And like we said before, it could also be third level. Okay? So it just depends on which organisms are being eaten as to whether they're a first level, second level, third level consumer. Producers are always the plants. Okay? Next thing we need to look at is talking about the ecosystem. So here we have our ecosystem, and connected to our ecosystem, every ecosystem is made up of living and non-living things. So let's make a connection here. We have two things that we can call the living things. The vocabulary word that you need to know is biotic. And the other word that we can use that describes all living things within an ecosystem is called the community. Okay? And then we have all of the non-living things, and the word we use for non-living is abiotic. The A means without, so without life is what this means. So we have the biotic, or the community, which is all the living organisms, and then we have the abiotic things. So when we talk about abiotic things, we're talking about things like rocks, and we're talking about things like sand, and you could add water to this. You could add air, things that are not living or never were. Okay? For the biotic things, anything that's living. We might have alligators, we might have pine trees, cattails, we might have beaver living there. If this is a freshwater community, we've got bass, we have butterflies and ants. All of these types of living organisms would be part of the community. We would also call each one of these a separate population. Population is the same type of organism. So we would have an alligator population, a bass population, a pine tree population, an ant population. So we have populations of different organisms that make up the community, which is the biotic component of the ecosystem. And then we have the abiotic component of the ecosystem, which is all the things that are not living nor were ever living. A dead tree branch, a dead fish, even though they're dead, they're still considered biotic because they're made of cells and they once were living. That's important to remember. Okay? The last thing we need to talk about is symbiotic relationships. The symbiotic relationships are the relationships between two different organisms where at least one of them benefits. And one way to maybe help you remember this, we have commensalism, mutualism, and parasitism. The way that my students came up with to remember parasitism, if you make a big P, okay, here's parasitism, and what we did is we made a big pee into a nasty, mean-looking creature. Okay? Make it nice and mad. So it's a parasite. And if you're in a relationship with a parasite, the parasite's going to benefit and you're not. Okay? So we would say one benefits, one is harmed. Okay? So that's parasitism. The next kind is commensalism. And the way we came up with commensalism, let me write this down. Here's your word. And in commensalism, one benefits, write that down, one benefits, one is unharmed. It doesn't benefit, but it's not harmed either. And this is the way we remembered this. We thought, okay, well, if a bird built a nest in a tree and had its little babies in there, the tree provides shelter for the bird nest to help protect the babies, keep them out of the weather, and to keep them hidden from predators. But the tree itself doesn't benefit at all. But it's not hurt either. So it doesn't benefit and it's not hurt. That's commensalism. So maybe that'll help you. And then the last one is mutualism. Let's do mutualism. And in mutualism, both benefit. Okay, and so the way we came up with to remember this is pretend like this M is actually two people shaking hands. So a little other hand over there and some legs here. So they're staying there, they're shaking hands because they just made a deal that benefits both of them. So they both benefit from the deal. So mutualism, they both benefit. Commensalism, one benefits, but the other one is not harmed, like a bird building a nest in a tree. And parasitism, one is going to benefit, but the other one is going to be harmed. Okay? So this is a review of the things you need to know for Content Standard number 9.